Hey YouTube, Alan back with another video, and this time I thought we'd do something a little different, hence why I'm behind the camera. Instead of talking about games, I'm going to talk about the kind of paraphernalia surrounding games, or more to the point, address one of the questions that often comes up. How did you know a game was good back in the day? Now, today you have YouTube, you got Twitch, you got all sorts of, video games in pop culture and, social media. It's easy to learn about new games. Not so back in the day. I mean, you had the odd TV show like Games Master, but you had very limited other means. One being magazines and stuff. Like back in the day, I would have had N64 magazine and Mean Machines would have been my big ones. They were great. I didn't spend too much on them, especially earlier on. And that's really where I wanted to focus on this. Not just magazines. But there was one particular thing that really drew me in, and that's what I want to focus this kind of video and perhaps this series on. And that is the game catalogue. Not the catalogue like Argos or Sears, but the catalogue that you often got within a with your video game, just highlighting stuff that was coming up. And this was my very first game catalogue. I'm trying to just level it so that I don't get the sun. This came in with my Master System too. And basically it is kind of like the 1991 era Sega games catalog, specifically tailored for Master System and Master System 2. Funny that they have to have a distinction, but I suppose they have the card releases for Master System 1. Now straight away, when you talk about the Master System, one of the things that comes up is bad box art. But by this point, Sega were clearly already moving to clear that. Like, I loved looking at this and seeing the different box art, because that's what these ultimately were. And like the possibilities, each frame, so you've Golden Axe Warrior, Cyber Shinobi, Psychic World, and so on. And then you hit the same type of beats that Sega were pushing with the Mega Drive. You have your sports franchise, you got your Disney license, you got Michael Jackson, They really were trying to create this synergy, but each picture here just jumped out at me. And I thought we'd just take a little bit of a guide through and kind of relive, I suppose, what it would have been like. And I'll probably zoom in or bring this up as we get closer. Yeah, that's what I'll have to do. Let's bring this up. So we start off the first section, arcade games. Now, I used to look at these screenshots and just like they were often just a picture into what was possible, because as I said, you didn't have a lot of videos, you didn't have a lot of other media. I mean, sometimes you would see these games in the box, on the shelves and in the stores, but even then I wouldn't have seen most of these games. I had a very limited selection where I was, so I would look and go, like Altered Beast or Double Dragon, they're just a title screen. What are they? I didn't know what Altered Beast was or Double Dragon. Eventually I did know Double Dragon because I played on other systems. And then of course you have your big, your new one, Ghouls and Ghosts. And look at that as a sprite. Well, what I would have thought was a sprite back in the day. It's probably a background layer actually. Like, wow, look at that for a Master System game. Now it runs a little choppy, but to be fair, it still is kind of impressive. Golden Axe. That's not a too bad a looking screenshot for what was a pretty impressive coin up. Coin up, not coin up. And, then you have your racing games and all sorts of stuff. And even more that kind of really got to me was the and more section just over here. Kind of hard to do this via the camera. You have your list. Not even do you get a screenshot of these ones, but they make you think. Rampage, Galaxy Force, Hang On, and so on. And then I always, why did it list Space Harrier twice? Of course, as a kid, I didn't realize, the product goes varies for region at times. And then I think as an adult, isn't it interesting that they don't highlight some of those at this point in the catalogue, but I suppose they were too old. Like, you think Space Harrier and R-Type would still be, in the catalogue? Of course, this is the ultimate challenge in games, by the way. So, moving on. Now, let's see if I can readjust position. You get to the shooting games, which is funny, because some of those in the arcade section seem like shooting games. You have your Ace of Aces, which is pretty impressive. Again, it's a title screen. And I love how the new ones get their one-line description in each language. Pilot your fighter bomber through 5 tense missions. That's not that great a game, really. You got Cloud Master Submarine Attack, and a whole bunch listed there, even the iPad stuff. Rambo 3, again, you think that would have been listed as a screenshot one because it's licensed. But I get, why not have Rambo 3, but you have a picture of Transbot? That seemed like, who picked the games? Who picked the screenshots? I can guess some of the screenshots because they perhaps hide what it's like. But looking at these now, I think Bomber Raid looks pretty good. But I wonder if I'm, I've played Bomber Raid. I thought it was a pretty decent game. Maybe I'm just biased. Aerial Assault looks pretty good. They actually all look pretty decent. I've never played Submarine Attack, even though I do own it. Anyway, we'll move on. We got the adventure role-playing, and the big one here is Golden Axe Warrior. That is actually a pretty good game. For anyone who hasn't played it, it's basically Sega's answer to kind of Zelda, and it's a pretty good version. The only thing that really annoyed me was the fact that you have to use the pause button to bring up the menu, and being an adventure game, you have to do it a lot. You got Ultimate 4, Spellcaster, Golvelius, Phantasy Star, Miracle Warrior. Notice how they almost all, with the exception of Spellcaster and Lord of the Sword, which are more action RPGs, they all basically just show you the title screen. I suppose it's hard to show an RPG in an exciting way, and there's no and more. That's your RPG lot. That's your adventure role-playing. Clearly a small section of the catalogue, despite the fact Phantasy Star is a pretty big game. So, on we go. Let's move onwards. Into the section, you can probably hear Ashley behind me, that I would have spent the most time looking at. Castle of Illusion, the action games. These were the games that I was drawn to. Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. I mean, that's a great game. I never actually got it back in the day, but it was Disney platformer. I was always drawn to it. And almost every one of these games I wanted as a kid. With the exception maybe of Dick Tracy. At some point, I wanted all of these. Psychic World, I just thought the names sounded cool. I was like, what could this possibly be? Cyber Shinobi. Eventually, I played Shinobi and thought, it's got to be even better. Cyber? Come on. How could it not be better? Jungle Fighter, probably one of the less interesting ones. But again, it looked like a decent action game. You got two Wonderboy games, Wonderboy 3 and Wonderboy and Monsterland. And in particular, I wanted those games. And once I got Wonderboy 3 and loved that, like Wonderboy and Monsterland, it was definitely just top of my list. And I'd actually played Wonderboy in the arcade, so I was just constantly looking at those screenshots going, man, I just want these games so bad. And I did get Wonderboy 3, but I never got the other two. And I never even seen the other two to buy. That was kind of the thing. I guess I was lucky I seen Wonderboy 3 and managed to get that. There's a story behind that, and I'll go to that probably in another video at some point. Alex Kidd in Shinobi World, again, mixing Alex Kidd and Shinobi, what's not to like? And Ghostbusters, I could see the Ecto 1 and the Trap and stuff, and I thought, yeah, I like the Ghostbusters movie, that's got to be another good one. And again, you're left reading through these things here, and I go, I had Alex Kidd in Miracle World, and I thought, that's a great game, and that's just listed in text. Some of these others must be brilliant too, although, funny enough, oh yeah, again, they've done the Rambo thing where they've listed it separately. As I look through them now, I kind of go, mixed lot. And it's kind of like, how do you decide, some of them should be in this action games versus arcade games or whatever? I suppose probably they weren't arcade releases. Even though the Ninja, I would have thought Ninja Princess might have had one, but maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I suppose that makes sense. And I suppose racing games kind of felt more like arcade, but I guess action is so generic. Anyway, moving on, we have family games. And yeah, what a big section. This was not one that I would have looked at that much, but to be honest, everything on the Master System, everything that in the catalog was enticing to me, so I would have still been interested to pick up anything from this, even if it was like chess or casino games. But really, yeah, I would have moved on. And same with sports. And there was obviously quite a few sports, and for a screenshot, Heavyweight Champ looks pretty decent. But the rest wouldn't have jumped out too much. I did enjoy the odd sports title, and I still do, but they weren't really that exciting, and never stuff that I looked at too much in the store. So that's basically it. As I said, I loved. Well, there is the back side, I suppose. Look, it's funny. They have the Master System 2 on the Master System catalog. I guess you could have gotten this for Master System 1, but if you had a Master System 1, why would you want a Master System 2? Kind of odd. Then you have the Peripherals, which make a lot more sense. replacement control pads, very much required. Light phasers, I never got one. Passed on it a couple of times, but never got one back in the day. I have one now. Rapid fire, never got that. And control stick. In fact, other than, do you know what? I never got any Master System accessories back in the day, because the control pad I got was actually Mega Drive. I didn't get a Master System one, although both of my original Master System controllers broke. And then you get to the final section, the other consoles from Sega, basically. And you have the true 16-bit power, best in graphics, sound, and gameplay for the Mega Drive. And you get the new Sega Portable Game Gear. So, I mean, you got those games. You start off with the artwork. Drawing you in, that's the box artwork, kind of a collage. You get a whole load of games thrown at you. And remember, you could sit at home, and I would have done, looking at all these screenshots, looking at Shinobi, looking at Wonderboy 3, going, God, that looks great. You know, I would love to try that. And in fact, I did end up getting several of them, because I got out when I got Shinobi, I got Wonderboy 3. And by and large, the ones I got from this list were all winners. So I got the impression that everything on this catalogue must be brilliant. That's not true, obviously, because there's a few duds in there, but by and large, actually, it's a pretty good selection. And then they end off with the enticement for the future. And they actually have a whole section down here. This camera wants to, yeah, with all the copyrights and stuff. So I did actually read through those back in the day to kind of get an idea of what was going on and who was making them as best as I could. And it really inspired me, because when I'd been my, reproduction games, as well as making the manual and game and stuff like that, the first time around I actually made a little mock catalog, following this exact format with the grid and the game catalog. Oh, apparently I also did a poster thing, I forgot about that. And it was the same format, the ultimate challenging games, arcade games, action games, battle games, family games, sports games, and it was kind of stuff that hadn't been released or that could be, it was just a little nod to these. But anyway, yeah. That was just a bit of a look through a Sega games catalog. I'd love to hear your thoughts about, looking through these catalogs, and were they a part of your childhood? Did you grow up with them? Did they give you an insight into the games? And more so, would you like me to see me do more? Because I've got plenty more catalogs, and more of them have kind of similar meaning, and might be worth taking a look through. So yeah, drop me, a comment below what you think, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.